The incarceration rate in the United States is the highest it's ever been, with the average being 1 in every 100 adults incarcerated. The rates are even higher among blacks and Hispanics, with 1 in 36 Hispanic adults incarcerated and 1 in 15 blacks incarcerated, according to the Pew Center on the States. What's the relationship between criminal justice or the criminal justice system and deepening poverty in the United States of America?
I want to start with Brother Howard ended, talking about what happened in the 60s when poor and working class people straightened their backs up, organized, and presented a serious threat to the powers that be. Because there's a connection between the new Jim Crow system and that rebellion. The response was you had gangsters in the FBI with their spies, including Martin Luther King Jr.'s photographer, who was with him every day of his life for the last 9 years. Brother Ernest, we ain't gonna mention his last name because I love his mama. You had gangsters in the FBI that said that we will kill, we will repress, we will crush the leaders who are part and parcel of this organized resistance and rebellion. And the FBI is very serious. They will kill you quick.
Yes, sir. Come on.
At the same time, you had, at that moment, think of it though, you had like 250,000 folk in prison. Majority of them were white brothers and sisters. Today you got 2.5 million. You got a Marshall Plan. Y'all know what a Marshall Plan is? Massive amounts of money, billions of dollars spent, but it's a carceral Marshall Plan, it's a penal Marshall Plan. $300 billion have been spent for the new Jim Crow system for hyper-incarceration. The jails, prisons, and the criminal justice system. The vast majority, poor. 72% soft drugs. Brother Bob Herbert just did a piece in the Times, echoed a recent statement. Young black folk take marijuana less so than white young black. Young black folk take marijuana less than young white folk. Young black folk arrested and convicted 7 times more, 6.6 times more. That's the racist criminal justice system. That's double standards, it's differential treatment, that's intense enforcement on the chocolate side of town and very soft enforcement on the vanilla side of town. That's what we're talking about. During the same period, you got the emergence of Reaganism, which was the unleashing of forces. Greed is good. Profit at any cost. And more obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. It's true. Corruption. What you gotta do is read the business page for the last 5 years. What do you see? Scandal after scandal after scandal, corruption after corruption, greed, avarice. I mean, that's gangster activity. It's just gangster on the top. That's all. That's all it is. How many go to jail? Okay, Brother MacDougall goes to jail. Wow, he's really gangsterizing, right? And he's even gangsterizing large numbers of Jewish brothers and sisters. Well-to-do Jewish brothers and sisters. Now, if he's gangsterizing white and Jewish brothers and sisters, he's in deep trouble. Deep trouble. How so? Because it's easy to cast a limelight on him. Now, if you're gangsterizing black poor, it's hard to cast a limelight on him. Because you don't have as much institutional clout to highlight the suffering that you're undergoing. What happened was that the response to the 1960s was to discourage poor people, and especially poor black and brown people, to struggle, to create opportunities for the top slice to produce highly successful ones who moved into the higher echelons and understood success connected solely to them so that they would become well adjusted to injustice. They would become well adapted to indifference. So individually they would be doing very well, but collectively they would be no longer thinking in terms of we and thinking in terms of I.
Yes, yes.
So you end up with a leadership that for the most part was milquetoast and spineless, conforming to the dominant forces of corporate greed and middle class indifference. And you know, with poor people's situation, hidden and concealed. That's what I mean by nobody talking about it.
That's right.
That's what I mean by the politicians. I know I may have upset some folks using Mother Hucker, but I just got upset. Precisely because it's hard to find any set of leaders of any color who make poor people central. There's one brother, keep your eye on tonight. His name is Russell Feingold, the Jewish brother in Wisconsin. He's losing at the moment. He's the only member of the Senate talking about poor people. The only one. He's like Paul Wellstone, the Jewish brother from Minnesota. He was one of the few. Rest of the senators, colonized by American Banking Association. Almost controlled by it. That's what the senator from Chicago said. I'm not. He said, our institutions legalize bribery and normalize corruption. That's what the senator said. I didn't say that. They're right though. Truth travels. So that when we talk about the prison industrial complex, we're not just talking about the collapse of our neighborhoods into hoods, and our dilapidated housing, and disgraceful school systems, and depression-like levels of unemployment and underemployment. But we're also talking about the ways in which the attempt to ensure that poor people and working people never again raise their backs up and take a stand and organize and mobilize, and to keep in place sets of leaders who are so severed and distant from those folk that somehow you can either pacify them or overlook them, act as if they do not exist. And right now we got a bipartisan consensus on the prison industrial system. You can have the worst budgetary deficit in the world, but you always find money. The politicians always find money for war. We were in a deep budgetary deficit when they declared war against Iraq. It cost $1 trillion so far. Afghanistan escalating $161 billion next year. That's Afghanistan. And we fighting over $4 billion for race to the top for education in hoods. That's little crumbs. As if education is a race and not a right.
That's right.
Little crumbs. And they always find money for prisons.
Oh yeah, they're gonna find money for that.
Jail.
Yep. They're gonna find money for that.
Criminal industrial complex. I mean the criminal justice system. Why? Because they understand that if somehow you can keep this set of communities relatively deferential, silent, or walking around with their backs humped over rather than their backs straightened up, then the corporate greed can go on. And that's where we stand right now. And it's a very sad situation. It's a very sad situation. Martin Luther King Jr. is turning over in his grave. And Malcolm X is having another breakdown with the worm. We don't know. You know what Paul Robeson be doing now.